France. Great cheese, great wine, and fun and interesting cars. But not just on the road, also in terms of racing. If you follow Formula 1, you may know of Alpine. It's actually Renault's works team, Alpine being a sub-brand, and it is the definition of mediocrity in racing. But they also are entering the Endurance Championships, and next year I believe they've got a full schedule in the hypercar category. What does any of this mean on a watch channel? Well, Yema, one of the fastest growing French watch companies, has partnered with Alpine and produced a watch. And that's this one that I've got right here. So the question is this going to be mid-table mediocrity like the Alpine F1 team? Or have we got a champion here that's going to be spraying champagne from the top step? Let's have a look. Okay, let's start with some specs on this one then. So we've got a 39mm case here. I measure 47.2mm lug tip to lug tip, 20mm lug width, 12mm thick. So this one will slide under a shirt. We've got 100 meters of water resistant, and the price retail is $990 US, but often you'll find you can get a 10% discount voucher. Or some other offers always seem to be running on the Yema website. In terms of styling, I'm going to call this watch retro, and the reason is that the Yema website states that it has, and I quote, 1970s racing charm, but the bracelet and the case are both from a 1980s Yema watch. So somewhere between the 70s and the 80s, let's go with retro for today. In terms of the design, there's some really nice contrast here. Starting off with the dial, so this is a matte black dial. Everything is printed on here, and that's in keeping with the vintage feel. You've got Yema and their logo at the top, and then Alpine Endurance Team at the bottom, along with the colours of the French flag. This one does have a date at the 3 o'clock. There's no surround on the date window, but as the watch's theme is black and white, it doesn't tend to be overly noticeable. It does at least work with the colorway. The hour and minute hand are brushed with lume, and then the seconds hand is Alpine blue, and notice the counterweight there on the seconds hand is the Alpine logo, which is quite a cool touch. The dial batons are also lumed, which I'll show you later on, and you've got the 60-second count up on the inside of those markers, and then of course your minute track as you'd expect. And I'm pleased to report on this watch, the second hand reaches all the way to the edge of the dial. The chapter ring on this one has a stationary scale, which you can use in conjunction with the bezel, I assume, to do some calculations. Probably not while you're driving your endurance car, but maybe if you're on the pit wall and all else fails, it might come in useful. In terms of case finishing on this one, you've got vertical brushing on the top, and then the sides are polished. It's quite simple, but it is well done, and it definitely fits the feel of retro with these sharp edges. Not sharp to the touch, but sharp in terms of design. Crown on this one has the Alpine logo on the side, which is a really nice touch. It's push-pull, but this is a motorsports watch, not a dive watch, so I'm quite happy with that, and you've still got 100 meters of water resistance even with that push-pull. The bracelet on this watch is really nicely finished. Like I said, it's from the Yema back catalogue. I'm glad they've brought this back. Very comfortable multi-link bracelet. There's a mixture of polishing and brushing on the bracelet, as you'll see from the video. It all works very nicely. Relatively small links, so they conform nicely to the wrist, and 3 holes of micro adjust on that clasp as well. And talking of the clasp, you've got a pressed outer and milled inner, and the milled inner is finished really nicely. You've got the Yema logo engraved in there, and a little bit of French wording just on the other side there. Caseback is solid, screw down, and made of steel. It's brushed. There's a couple of specs and bits of information, and in the center, of course, is the Alpine Endurance Team logo, which is really nicely stamped into the back of the case. On my channel, I always let you listen to the bezel So I'm not going to deny you that pleasure on this watch. Yes, it's a friction fit bezel on this one, so no noises today, I'm sorry. But to be honest, it's very nicely done. It's smooth, it tends to stay in position, although I have noticed if I wind the watch, sometimes my fingers are catching the bezel and rotating it. But day-to-day wear, if you move it to time something, it's going to stay in position. And a nice vintage aluminium insert there, as you'll see with the sliding scale on it. So with this watch, I really want to talk about the movement because it is in-house, and I think that's one of the big selling points here. So first of all, mine is running really nicely, about +4 seconds per day, around 310 on the amplitude and no beat error. These are really nice numbers. It's a 4 Hz movement, so you've got a relatively smooth sweep there, and it's regulated in the factory to 4 positions and guaranteed to be ±10 seconds per day. It's got a 42-hour power reserve, and it does also state on the website that the movement is decorated, but obviously in this case, I can't verify that. I know when Yema first launched their in-house movements, I believe it was the 1000, there was some issues and they have been able to resolve those, and the Yema 2000 seems to be a much better movement. I don't notice people online having any issues with it, and it is effectively a second generation movement now, so it seems like they've ironed out many of the early issues, and I've got faith that this one will stand the test of time. But if it doesn't, I can always take it back to my local Yema dealer. And just a very quick point I'd like to make is to ask you, my audience, to consider supporting your local independent watch shops. My local watch shop is a place called Bezel House here in Calgary. You can go to bezelhouse.com if you want to check them out. They are the only authorized dealer of Yema in Canada, and this is where I'm able to go try on the watches, have good service, and always negotiate a good deal as well. This isn't a sponsored video, I just have dealt with Bezel House for a long time. As a courtesy, I'll give them a shout out. Anyway, back into the review, let's talk about lume. So lume on this, unsurprisingly, isn't great. It's not the strong point of the watch. It's okay for a couple of hours, but after that, you're not going to see a lot, and to be honest, it's pretty dim even after 5 or 10 minutes or so. It's usable, again, with the type of watch that it is. I'm not going to mark it down too much in this category, and I'm always aware with flat dials and without applied indices, the lume is always somewhat limited. So for me, I said the case back was really nicely stamped with the Alpine Endurance logo, and I'm not lying, it is. But around the edges, where this was pressed into the case back, there is some strange, uneven surfaces when it catches the light, like ripples, if you like, along the edge. You'll see on the video here, it's not fantastic. It's not big enough for me to bother taking the watch back or requesting a new case back or anything like that, but it has passed QC and it is visible to my naked eye. Second point, let's stay on the case back. This is a in-house movement with decoration on the rotor. I don't know, maybe it would have been nice to have an open case back here. I certainly feel with only 100 meters of water resistance, I think it would have made the watch that little bit more special. The pressed outer clasp on this is fine with the micro adjust, but it's a bit of a weak point in terms of quality in comparison to the rest of the bracelet. The links are really nicely finished. The milled inner is really nicely finished, and the pressed outer, the finishing is fine, but it feels a bit cheap in comparison to the rest of the bracelet. Final negative on this, it's a small nitpick, but when you're winding the watch, as it's a push-pull crown, your fingers tend to rub smears all over the side of the polished case, and then you end up having to wipe it down immediately if you're fussed with things like that. But that said, I think this watch has some really powerful positives. The first thing is, it's less than $1,000 and you're getting something that's designed and assembled in France with an in-house movement. And I think that's pretty cool. Me personally, I love the high contrast on this. It's very easy to read, and black and white is a colorway that is interesting, but something that is also versatile. It goes with everything. I think this is definitely a winner in terms of colorway, and you've got those pops of color on the dial with that blue seconds hand and also the colours of the French flag. The final major positive for me is that as a motorsports fan, this is a collab between a watch company and a racing team that I can actually afford. If you watch Formula One, you'll know half the teams are sponsored by Richard Mille, so it's nice to have a new collaboration with a racing team that is in the reasonably affordable category. And I say that with a pinch of salt because I know $1,000 is still a hell of a lot of money, and I'm not going to say that's cheap by any means. Anyway, on to the conclusion.
Yes or no, this is your last chance, no beating around the bush.
So I asked you if you would buy a Yema watch, and 38% of you said yes, 45% of you were undecided, and 18% of you say no chance. These are really interesting results. I think before buying this Yema, I was in the 45% undecided. And I think having had this watch, although it's not perfect, it's not the champion and it's not on the top step, I think it's definitely on the podium, definitely gets a trophy, and definitely gets some champagne. So I'm leaving the undecided category, and I'm going firmly into the category of yes, I would buy a Yema, and effectively yes, I would buy another Yema, and I hope I will in the future. Let me know what your thoughts are on Yema, why you would or why you wouldn't buy one, and what you think about this tie-up and this collaboration. I always read your comments, and I always try and reply to as many as I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed the video, a thumbs up and a subscription would mean the absolute world to me as a small channel. Thank you again to all my returning viewers, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers.